That didn't fail, that succeeded. So what happens when one of your artworks actually succeeds?
Well, I think, I don't think that, as an artwork, I don't think that piece is a failure. It's interesting, but I think that piece works quite well as a scientific model in the sense that it was like this table. I built a machine and I was quite naive to know what the effect would be when I put these specific bevel gears into this machine and turn them all on, linked to each other like an engine. And they turned them on. I took a photograph for the first time and it created these beautiful
You didn't know what you were going to see.
I didn't know. I knew that it would cause a trace, but I had no idea that it would cause these complex donuts.
Is that part of the art in the sense that you didn't know what you were going to... If you'd already known that would have been...
I think that's how I don't know if it's part of the art, but it's part of the process. It's similar to science in the sense that the experiment of the thing offers sometimes, and often some of the most striking sort of discoveries have been by accident.
So you're almost dramatising the process of discovery in the sense that you're almost reliving what it's like to discover that.
But I think that the piece, while it does demonstrate sort of some of the things you're talking about, it also it uses a lot of sort of like kind of quite arbitrary, quite aesthetic, kind of subjective decisions that are made to make this thing one arm half the length of the other.
Yeah, that's sort of
it's all made of oak, and it's all made. I mean, the oak is in terms of my latest work I would actually be more hesitant about using such spectacular kind of materials, but it was the way that my systems were conceived at the time. But it's kind of as a viewer you don't. I don't think it's successful as a demonstration, because as a viewer you're confronted by this thing and you don't really, there are so many ways to interpret it.
You just see all the things spinning
around. You don't know that the trace is there until you see the photograph on the wall. Yeah. And there's sort of this strange dichotomy between it being a particle and a wave. You've got, there's a lot of different levels of which it can be viewed on, whereas it can't. It's not just, if it was clearer and more succinct as a demonstration, it would be less successful for me. Right. I think there's just so many levels it's seen on, but it does intrinsically just take these basic ratios of things to each other, things we see here and sound beautiful to us and we're moved by. And I was very concerned and very interested in why our brains find such particular orders so enigmatic or so moving.
Right. So
and I was trying to look at those in an objective way by representing the hour in a visual way. So synesthesia and
okay.
I was going to say, in answer to your concern about is it art or is it science, I think it's a little bit like asking is a photon a particle or a wave, because to me both endeavours, mathematics and art, are tunneling into reality, which is an awful lot more complicated than our eyes, as you were saying, can see, and is attacking reality with different tools, some of which are poetic and visual, and some of which are abstract and sequential, and getting something out of it which is new. And that's the element that is so exciting about anything that is successful. And when you speak about failure, I think what you're talking about is imperfection. That it's a success if there is an imperfection, because the imperfection allows room for progress. Once you've got to perfection, it's boring.
Yeah, there's not perfection, it's just something that proves
imperfection is what I'm talking about. Yeah. It has to be imperfect so you can move on. So there's more.
But it's just, I mean, it's sort of, I quite like watching really bad movies because they show you how difficult, how problematic it is to represent. When you see something that's incredibly seamless, it's just seeing the things fail is actually an incredibly good, effective way of looking at how complex the world is.
It breaks things open.
Yeah, I mean.
Allows room.
Any more questions?
I just had a quick one, just really to chuck it in, about belief systems. The sort of science that Matthew engages with is the pursuit of a few, really, of people who are highly specialised. But the vast majority of us just have to go with it. We just have to believe you. And I think a lot of contemporary art, for many people, likewise, you have to just go with it and trust those artists that they are pursuing a line of inquiry or an investigation or experimenting or playing, however they, whatever their practice is. And I just wondered if that had cropped up in the notion of belief, I personally think art is a belief system, especially contemporary practice.
Well,
But I feel the same about science because I feel alienated from it. I don't have enough capacity to understand. So I have to believe when people tell me all these things.
well, there's several interesting questions embedded in that. Is it all right to respond? Yeah. I mean, there's the scientists themselves believing something. The scientists who know what they're doing, and mathematicians, are believing certain foundational. The idea of science is partly to strip away belief systems and try and get to the truth, but you always have to believe at least that the world has some sort of consistency to it. There's no point looking for laws of physics if the world could just suddenly decide it's going to change them at any moment. So you have to believe in some sort of consistency through time. And also there are certain things, subtle things which science uses because it tends to reduce everything to models which can be quantified. There's something called the law of large numbers, which I can't get into, but it's a very subtle hidden belief system within experimental science which no one really wants to talk about. It seems to work, so everyone just leaves it alone, but I'm quite interested in sizing into that. But that's not really what you're talking about. You're talking about the general public believing that the scientists are actually correct in what they're doing, or that they're not just taking you down a blind alley. And similarly, it's true. I mean, if you go into a gallery and you see a piece and maybe you read the press release, you might think, well, maybe this is a genuine pursuit of this deep idea that I'm being presented with, or maybe this person's just having a go, really, just making it up as they go along. Now in the case of science, you can go into a maths degree, you can go into a physics degree, you can learn it for yourself and get some verification of what you're seeing. There's also a whole hierarchical structure of peer review and publications and things. So someone who's making it up in mathematics is going to get shown up very, very quickly. You can't get away with that for very long. There are some super specialised areas where only about 2 or 3 people know what they're doing, where maybe for sort of funding reasons people really are making it up. I doubt it. But in the arts, there isn't that similar structure. Someone could, well, possibly, but I mean, someone could, if they are sufficiently confident, really just do what they, make up a whole story about what they're doing. It's hard to get any verification that they are really doing what they say they're doing.
But nevertheless, there is some kind of selective process at work. I mean, we touched on this a little bit. We talked about how there's a scientific institution, and so when we talk about science, we can't just talk about one lone scientist in the room, but we have to talk about this institutional structure and its history and its archiving process. And we try to think, well, what is the equivalent in the art world? Is it simply the art market? Is it art history? But it was very difficult to see how we could see any kind of equivalent.
Well, but there is. I mean, I didn't think about it at the time, but there is a relay of ideas in the art world. It is other artists responding. There are people. I mean, I'm not particularly one who has tried to define or been that interested in artists performing, in the sense that I've always been interested in these scientific or philosophical areas, and I haven't tried to find myself in that context of an art. But a lot of art will just define itself in terms of that taking that process further.